Welcome to Couch Quarterbacks.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome to the Couch Quarterbacks podcast. I'm Andrew Rochford. With me is Ben Steinberg. And Stein, it's crazy to think that we are less than 2 weeks away from the NFL season.
You know, when we hear the red zone theme, Roach, we might shed a few tears. It's been... Last year was a year. It was a semi-real year, but this year it's a little bit more real. Full stadiums, probably across the board. I say that probably because we don't know what could happen. Next weekend, college football too. Huge slate of awesome games, guys. This is probably one of the best starting weekends in a minute. That's what they've been doing lately, is just really good starting weekends for college football. So definitely some guys to look for in the NFL, definitely some good prospects to look at. But we are an NFL-focused podcast, so we will be talking about all NFL stuff coming up. Today, we are going to be talking AFC South and AFC West, finishing the AFC as a whole. Mm-hmm. A division that really has been moving and shaking, our conference that's been moving and shaking as a whole. Kind of the original powers are kind of dying, and we're seeing an emergence of new powers. And what better than to get into the division that I used to think was the best?
I would say the AFC South, so that's what we'll start off talking about, the South. And I'd say that they're probably one of the more even divisions, because there's not really a big headliner in this division. There's a couple of teams that are going to be battling it out for that division championship. Let's start off, Stein, with the Indianapolis Colts. 11-5 last season, end up losing to the Buffalo Bills in the wild card round. A close game, 27.
You think they hung a banner
to 24.
for that?
But that's what the Colts, and GM and Chris Ballard, head coach Frank Reich, both got extended contract extensions a couple weeks ago through the 2026 season. Well deserved. This is a team that really, since the shocking Andrew Luck retirement a couple of years ago, has still been able to put together a playoff worthy roster, and they've had some good teams the past couple seasons.
Yeah, I mean, since they've been scrambling to kind of fill that void at quarterback, I feel like if they had luck, this team could have been up there with some of the other big dogs. But they're kind of like a mid-tier to, I would say mid-tier to maybe higher mid-tier AFC team. I mean, they're certainly not going to, I don't think they have what it takes to win a Super Bowl. I do think their defense is good, but I mean, when it all said and done, it's going to come down to the quarterback, and we have some big questions with the quarterback for the Colts.
Yeah, so that's what they signed, or got Phillip Rivers last season. He ends up retiring at the end of the season, so they end up going to the trade market and bringing in Carson Wentz, who last season with Philly was
really bad season across the board. I mean, everyone's talking about the reuniting with Frank Reich, because Frank Reich was his offensive coordinator in Philly, and was when he was successful. All well and good. You know, everyone was on board for this. It was a match almost made in heaven. I wouldn't say perfect, but almost. But then Carson Wentz has been going through some stuff lately, definitely with the injury bug, and it's been the weirdest timetable.
Yeah, so that's what he got, a foot injury a couple weeks ago, and they gave a 5 to 12 week recovery period. He ends up having surgery on the foot, and
5 to 12. That's such a random.
It's kind of like whenever you get some sort of service at your house, like a plumbing service or like electrical
we'll be there
service.
Between the hours of 8 and 7 p.m. or something.
Exactly, but that's what. So he has the surgery, and he was actually back at practice on Monday. That was just 3 weeks after the surgery. So as of right now, he's on that better end of the timetable. They're saying that barring any setbacks, that he's probably going to end up starting week 1. Which is a huge sigh of relief for this Colts team, because they would have already been behind the 8 ball. From offensive standpoint, was already going to be a question mark. But then having either a second-year guy in Jacob Eason or rookie quarterback in Sam Ehlinger starting week 1 would have been a big no for them.
Yeah, nobody really trusts, these two young guys. Both of them, we've seen in college, Ehlinger and Eason. They as much as they would love to have Jacoby Brissett, right now.
Yeah, he's with Miami now.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation. The fact that Wentz is injury prone, and has always been, but now that he's back on the field, hopefully not rushing, and by all accounts, it will be ready to go week one.
That's my big question is what should we expect from Carson Wentz this season? Because like we said, not a good season last year. The Eagles were not a good team. He was tied for the league in interceptions, got sacked 50 times. He's got a much better offensive line with the Colts, but in terms of playmakers, I'd say it's about even in terms of guys that he's got that he's throwing to.
Maybe better than what the Eagles had, and certainly a better situation. Because Philly was ready to cast him to the streets,
those Philly fans are so remorseful.
Exactly, they're ready to forgive anyone. It's almost like a Ben Simmons situation. The fact that you saw a kid very successful, just screw up, and then they're ready to throw him to the wolves.
I will say Phillip Rivers was a 4,000-yard passer last season, albeit it was a lot of just checkdowns, not really much of a downfield presence. 24 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, and I think the big one, only sacked 19 times last season. So like I said, the improvement of the offensive line.
Yeah, and Phillip Rivers is not a super mobile guy, so
is age 30,
not 39,
late 30
exactly.
Something.
Yeah, I mean, with Carson Wentz, he's not a guy who's going to kill you with his arm or his legs. He's just going to have to play like an average to maybe below like Matt Stafford level to really be what I would consider a success for him this coming season, which anything better than last season is a success for him.
I was going to say, that's what I think he's set up for a much better season, and going back to his MVP caliber seasons when he was first with the Eagles, just because he's got the better offensive line. He's got a top 10 running back in the league, a young running back in Jonathan Taylor. Just being able to have that fresh start. There's so many guys that it seems like we were saying, just with Philly, he almost overstayed his welcome. Yeah. And that just being able to have a fresh start in Indianapolis with a new team, going to a team that made the playoffs last season, I think he's at least set up in a situation to be great. Now, in terms of whether he actually will or not, that'll be up to him. We said he's already been battling the injuries in this training camp, so if he can stay healthy, then I think he's set up to have a nice season with the Colts.
Yeah, and then so let's talk about, you kind of mentioned it already, but the running back situation. Hopefully they won't be having to rely on their passing games, and they'll be can work with the running game. Jonathan Taylor has kind of emerged as the leading running back based on his performance last season. He was honestly third on the depth chart going into last season, and just really quietly took over.
Yeah, had a great rookie season, almost 1,200 yards on the ground, 11 touchdowns, and then also was pretty nice in terms of receiving the football. Of course, Marlon Mack went down with the injury at the beginning of last season. I think it was during the offseason still, but he was a 1,000-yard rusher back in 2019, so he's coming back to this team. So I think it could be a nice little 1A and 1B punch in terms of Taylor and Mack. And then, of course, you've got Nyheim Hines for all the receiving work. He had 63 receptions last season. So in terms of those three, that's a nice depth at the running back position for the Colts.
Yeah, definitely have some pieces there. And I feel like their offense is going to be, pretty much a run first with Taylor. Have Taylor just be a workhorse running back, maybe 20 carries a game.
Yeah, I could definitely see it that way. And that's especially because when you go to their pass catchers, like we had mentioned before, kind of questionable on that front. You have T.Y. Hilton, who they ended up re-signing in the offseason. A down year for him, just 56 receptions, 762 yards, 5 touchdowns. It was his worst non-injury season since his rookie year. So I think you might see just the combination of having Phillip Rivers as your quarterback and a little bit of a decline from T.Y. Hilton might not be the wide receiver one for them this season.
Yeah, definitely also getting up there with age. Not a fantasy darling anymore as he once was. Also look at Michael Pittman, who...
Yeah, a lot of people like him to be their new wide receiver one.
Yeah, but the stats last year weren't that great. 40 catches for just over 500 yards with only a single touchdown.
Yeah, he battled a little bit of injuries last season, too, with just playing in 13 games. So.
Wasn't out there, but definitely is going to emerge on the other side of the line with T.Y., just being the other pass catcher. Paris Campbell, too, as the the third receiver. Only played a few games though.
I was gonna say just kind of the same song and dance with a lot of these guys with the Colts. He was a second round pick in 2019. Has only played in 9 games total in his first 2 seasons. Had some really bad leg injuries in his first 2 seasons. So hopefully he'll be able to stay out there and on the field because he's definitely a very intriguing prospect. And then when you look at their tight ends, they lose Trey Burton, but they've got a decent committee with Jack Doyle, who's going to be more of a blocking tight end. Mo Alley Cox is more their receiving tight end. And then a lot of people have been liking this rookie, Kylan Granson. They drafted in like the 5th round this past year. He's been getting a lot of praise in training camp for his pass catching ability. So look for him to be maybe their main pass catcher, but they're definitely going to rotate between those 3 tight ends.
Yeah. And then, protecting them, all those guys is going to be the offensive line that, is kind of up there with the Browns and some of the other teams we talked about last week, with being a really good offensive line. Projected to be one of the second best in the NFL. They do lose Anthony Costanzo to retirement, but they do sign Eric Fisher from the Chiefs. Unfortunately, Fisher, we saw at the end of the season last year, didn't get to play in those playoffs because of an Achilles injury. Yes,
he's still recovering from that. He's on the PUP list and also on the COVID list. Got put on that yesterday. They're saying there's reports that he may not be ready until October, so might need to have a filler piece in there for the first couple weeks of the season. And then Quentin Nelson at left guard had the same injury to his foot that Carson Wentz had, underwent that same surgery, same timetable for recovery, that 5 to 12 weeks. But he was back out there at practice on Monday this past week, so all signs are pointing for him to be ready and out there week 1. And then one other injury for them on the offensive line, their center, Ryan Kelly, has had an elbow injury. He was back at practice on Monday after he missed a couple weeks of training camp. So a little banged up on the offensive line, but it's looking like pretty much everyone except maybe Eric Fisher will be out there week 1.
Yeah, and I'm sure they'll have a swing tackle to fill in for them. But it's it's overall, like we said, Phillip Rivers wasn't sacked that much last year. So it should be a pretty similar offensive line. Now on the defensive side of the ball, the name of the game is Darius Leonard, kind of the signature leader, signs a 5-year, $100 million contract extension.
Very deservedly so. This was an elite defense last season. They were the second best rush defense last year, so Darius Leonard is definitely the big name on that defensive front.
From the previous season, DeForest Buckner, wasn't as good as he was in San Fran, but hopefully we'll have a better year. Also have a really good corner in Kenny Moore, nickel corner, had 4 picks last year, led the team. Tyquan Lewis at defensive end, also good. Kari Willis at strong safety. And then Xavier Rhodes, the
former Seminole. He had some great years with the Vikings, then kind of fell off there towards the end of his tenure there.
Still a veteran, though, a veteran in the secondary. So overall, a very above-average defense.
Yeah, definitely. And then a little fantasy outlook. We'll look at Carson Wentz first. Definitely a solid QB2 option. Great for super flex leagues, possible back-end QB1, just depending on how he does with this new team. I think he's a definite streamer option when you get to those bye weeks in the middle of the season.
I would say streamer. I'm a little bit weary because I have had him and I've completely dropped him just because I'm kind of afraid of his numbers last year. A little bit disgusting to me. But then let's go about a guy who's become a fantasy darling that I also have is Jonathan Taylor.
He's being drafted as the running back 7, the back end of the first round for this season.
I think that might be a little bit low. Maybe he could be up there in the top 5.
Yeah,
we'll see.
I think the biggest thing that's tough for him is
going to be sharing carries.
Yeah, exactly. When you're looking for that running back in the first round, you want the bell cow back that's going to be out there all 3 downs. No one really knows what Marlon Mack's role is going to be in this offense now that Jonathan Taylor's there.
I've seen depth charts where Mack and Hines have been listed as just as receivers and stuff. It's interesting,
You know how training camp, it seems like all the running backs are trying out at wide receiver just to get in some receiving work. But I would say Marlon Mack's off fantasy boards for right now just because you don't know what you're going to get for him. Nyheim Hines definitely got some late round PPR appeal.
He's a better pass catcher too, so can get those. Like you said, PPR.
One big downside for him is going to be you don't have Phillip Rivers checking it down all the time. Carson Wentz should be airing the ball out a little more, so you may see a little bit of dip in the catch department. Michael Pittman is being drafted round 9 right now in fantasy drafts. T.Y. Hilton round 12. Both of them are good speculative ads because one of them is going to be the wide receiver 1. So to be able to get a wide receiver 1 and a first or second receiving option on a team, even though they are going to be more run heavy in those later rounds, just off your bench is definitely some good value.
Yeah.
Like I said, a lot of people are picking Michael Pittman to be a big sleeper option this year. They think he's going to have a breakout season. So definitely a good ad for your wide receiver depth on your bench.
Yeah, tight ends you kind of want to stay away from. Mo Alley Cox, maybe
some tight end streamer appeal
if you need something on your bench, but just stay away. But defense, definitely look at the Colts defense. Going to get some turnovers there. Darius Leonard's going to get you all sorts of forced fumbles, sacks, picks. Just a great defense all around.
Yeah, they were third best last season. Expect them to finish in the top 5 again this upcoming season.
Yeah. Moving on to
boy.
Here's a team that we've been thinking about for a while. I think every single NFL expert, quote unquote, has this team going 32nd in power rankings, going 1 in 16. Excuse me.
The extra game this season.
Wow, I even wrote on our notes. I said 0-16 potentially. 0-17 potentially. This could be the first 0-17 team ever, and that is the lowly Houston Texans. It seems like, let's just start off before we talk about them. It seems like the city of Houston is not having a lot of good luck overall with their sports teams as of lately.
Yeah, I mean, the Rockets have gone from the team that was 1 win away from the NBA Finals a couple years back to now they're a bottom dweller in the NBA.
Astros with all the signed stuff.
They are in first place in the division.
They are still good. But, they're still marred by... They'll still be marred by that.
I saw something... Just a quick side note. I saw something recently where Josh Reddick is on the Diamondbacks now, and he was getting booed by... I guess it was Dodger fans, maybe. That would make sense because they were playing them in the World Series, but he was getting booed, and people were banging on trash cans and stuff. Literally 2 years later, when he's not even on the team anymore, still getting the repercussions from that. But yeah, so Houston as a sports...
Houston, you have a problem. Okay, let's be honest. And the biggest problem right now for the city of Houston in terms of their football team is Deshaun Watson and his ongoing legal battle with the sexual misconduct cases.
Yeah, so there's still a lot of stuff up in the air about Deshaun right now. You've seen him in training camp right now, practicing with like the 3rd and 4th string guys as a quarterback. You've seen him on the defensive scout team at times, just so he's not basically just to be out there at training camp, so he's not getting those $50,000-$75,000 fines or whatever for not showing up to camp.
Yeah.
So like I said, it's kind of confusing in terms of the situation right now. So because his criminal cases are active, the league cannot interview him, and therefore, because they can't interview him, I guess they can't put him on the commissioner's exempt list. It's kind of like a loophole in just all like the rulings that they have for the NFL.
Yeah, they can't touch him right now.
So he can be on the roster and be at these training camp practices and stuff, but reports over the past couple days have said he's probably going to be a healthy scratch once the regular season gets underway. He hasn't played at all during the preseason, so he hasn't seen any sort of like significant playing time just besides practicing.
Yeah, this has been an insane story for him, and me and Roach, we love the guy. I mean, like, this is an Atlanta kid or Gainesville kid. I mean, close enough.
Georgia guy
that we saw. I mean, I don't think you loved him at Clemson. I always liked him though, just being a local kid.
Yeah, I guess we should say we loved his play on the football field.
Yeah, I mean, we're not saying we condone anything that he's done, whether it be true or not. Obviously that's disgusting, and that is something that is beyond our control. But it's a story that we hate to see for such a guy who was a hero for a lot of people.
And a guy that he had a career year last season. 70% completion percentage. He passed for almost 5,000 yards, 33 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Had almost 500 yards rushing on the ground. A guy who's up
there, with Mahomes as the future of the quarterback position in the NFL. Now, the Texans as a whole have seen a lot of turnover. Also, I was going to mention that, you have Nick Cassero,
they got a new GM, new head coach.
David Coley, new head coach. One of only 3 African-American head coaches in the NFL right now, David Coley is. So that's a great story. But that's a job you don't want to have right now.
Yeah.
David Coley's job.
Yeah, Deshaun has said that he doesn't want to be in Houston. Apparently, since Coley's been hired, him and Deshaun have kind of butted heads. So it's just been a big headache right now in Houston. It's looking like Tyrod Taylor is going to be the week 1 starter.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's talk about the other quarterback options. They do draft Davis Mills.
An intriguing option. Another guy that's from Georgia went to GAC. So they have him, but I think a lot of the reports from training camp have said that he's looked like a rookie, made a lot of mistakes in training camp. Have Jeff Driscoll as well, who's been playing for a couple seasons as a backup. But Tyrod Taylor is going to be looking like their week 1 starter for the Texans. He started both their preseason games, so.
And you got to love Taylor, too. I mean, Taylor's one of those guys who's just constantly gotten playing time just because he's been reliable. He's not going to be flashy, but he's been reliable. So it's good for him, and he's also had some very bad luck too. With the whole
with what happened last season,
the whole getting a shot in the wrong place last
year.
Yeah, that is insane. But so quarterback Deshaun is probably going to be a healthy scratch, and it's just you hate to see that.
And of course, throughout the whole offseason, there's been talks about trading him out. It might take 3-4 first-round draft picks. I think until all this stuff in court gets figured out, that he's gonna be a Texan. He's gonna be a healthy scratch, and until all this stuff gets resolved, that nothing's really gonna change on that front in terms of him being on a new team.
Let's talk about their retirement home of a running back.
I was gonna say we'll go to the next position, which really doesn't get any better. They're starting running backs, which are all...
Nobody's under the age of 29. Or 27, excuse me.
27. So you got David Johnson, who is the incumbent running back.
Yes, their prized possession, as we saw with last year's trade.
Yes, he's 29 going into this season. And then in terms of free agent pickups, they add Mark Ingram, 31 years old.
He was a healthy scratch at the end of last season.
Philip Lindsay, who was splitting time in Denver, he's 27. And then they add Rex Burkhead, who's one of the 12 running backs on the Patriots roster last year, who's also 31 years old. So everyone thought David Johnson was going to be the starting running back. Like I said, he was the incumbent guy, had 700 yards rushing last season, a team that's not going to run the ball a lot because they're losing. But the early indication now has been that he's going to be more of a third down back, and the early down role is going to be kind of split between Philip Lindsay and Mark Ingram.
Oh, God.
Yes, it's a whole messy situation right now with the Texas running game. Like I said, they're going to be losing a lot of games, so I guess it's not something to worry about too much because they're probably not going to be in a situation to run the ball the majority of the time.
When we get into the fantasy aspect, we'll talk a little bit more, but this is going to be a situation where you're going to have 4 carries for 12 yards. You know?
I mean, between Lindsay and Ingram last season, they had 700 yards rushing. Like I said, 700 yards rushing for David Johnson last season. So you might see combined this team go for about 1,000 or 1,200 yards rushing. It's not going to be pretty on that front.
No, second worst rushing offense last season. And
expect them to be a bottom
the fact they didn't
again.
improve that with anything means it's going to be the same, if not worse.
Yeah, Tyrod Taylor might be one of the leading rushers just because he'll be on the field for the majority of the time.
He's not even the most mobile, quarterback. So
he's decent, but
he's not like Lamar, mobile. But
no. But looking at their wide receivers, they have Brandon Cooks is definitely going to be their wide receiver 1. Had almost 1,200 yards receiving last season, 1,000-yard receiving seasons for 4 different teams in his career, which is just crazy to me.
This guy just gets passed around, no one, everyone. He's kind of like Rosen, and I'll talk about Rosen probably at the end if we have time. But it seems like he goes everywhere, and people don't want him. But finally, he has a home in Houston.
I was to say, I'm sure he's not happy to have his home in Houston as of right now, but he's definitely the wide receiver 1, going to get a bunch of targets and a bunch of receptions, and once again, a team that's going to be passing the ball a whole lot.
Yep.
So they draft Nico Collins out of Michigan. Missed their last preseason game with a muscle pull. He was back at practice this past week, though. He's probably going to be the wide receiver 2 on the opposite side of Brandon Cooks. So
I always say, Big Ten receivers, not the best, especially Michigan receivers. We've seen a lot of guys, haven't worked out, and I think Nico Collins is going to be on that list.
Like I said, in terms of wanting to get reps and get playing time and all that, this is probably a best case situation for him.
Yeah.
Just to go to this team. They trade for Anthony Miller from the Bears, but he dislocated his shoulder, and there's no timetable for his return. So Chris Conley, Kiki Kuti are the other options, but just not very solid receiving core behind Brandon Cooks for this team.
Yeah. So the offensive line is not as bad as it could be. I mean, Laramie Tunsil is still a kind of a stud. I think he could be the best player on the whole team overall, honestly.
Yeah, there's not much competition for it, so yeah, you could definitely put him as like one of the top 2 guys on the team.
Add Marcus Cannon from New England,
he opted out of 2020.
Yeah, in 2020. And Justin Britt isn't bad. So not a bad offensive line, really.
That's what projected 20th this season, so that might be one of their best position groups out of anything
Honestly.
on this team. And then just a bad defense. They were the worst rush defense last season. They lose their franchise guy in J.J. Watt. So
it's the defense, just no names really, nobody worth any salt, I would say.
I mean, Fantasy Outlook, this is once again going to be quick. Deshaun is still getting drafted in 12-team leagues. Round 11, round 12.
No,
we mentioned his stats. He was a QB5 last season. If you want to add him just as a speculative like QB2, just on the off chance that he plays this season...
it's definitely a wait and see kind of a thing with him.
I would rather just leave him on the waiver wire. If you want a second quarterback, Trey Lance is going right around the same time as him. He's has more of a guarantee of actually playing this season.
I mean, the upside is huge though if somehow he does play, but like the odds of that are just very low. If you can get him at the end of the draft or the first waiver wire pickup or something, no one drafts him. I would say he's better than just like having Kiki Kuti on your bench or something.
See, the best case scenario would be if you have a league where if he ends up getting put on like the commissioner's exempt list, and then you can put him in your IR spot, so he's not taking up a roster spot on your team. I would say that'd pretty much be the only reason to draft him and roster him. But until then, just leave him out there on the waiver wire.
Yeah. The running backs, Philip Lindsay's going around 12.
Yeah,
David Johnson, 8.
David Johnson's been dropping. He was getting drafted in like the 6th round a couple weeks ago, but now with all the news of him being more of a third down back, I'd say if you owned anyone in this Houston backfield, it'd be Philip Lindsay as like your last draft pick off the boards. But otherwise, you really don't want any of these guys in Houston just because there's not going to be a whole lot of production running the football.
Brandon Cooks is, could see a lot of targets. But he's also been an injury.
I was gonna say, I like Brandon Cooks. He's going in the 7th round right now. He's gonna eat up all those targets just about in Houston. A little bit of concern with Tyrod Taylor being the one passing him the football, but in terms of a guy that's just gonna see a lot of receptions, definitely in PPR leagues, you could look at as him being a bench option. So everyone else on the team, the tight end. Notice how we didn't even bring up tight ends. Defense just don't even look the Texans' way for that.
Yeah. Moving on to a team that I think you and I are predicting to win this division.
Yeah, definitely between them and the Colts is the favorite to win this division, and that's the Tennessee Titans. They were also 11-5 last season, end up losing in the wild card round to the Ravens. The big offseason news for them is Arthur Smith going to Atlanta to be the Falcons head coach, Todd Downing taking over as the offensive coordinator for this team, and a lot of people are wondering what this is going to do, if this changes anything in the offense in terms of feeding Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill's success in Tennessee.
Yeah, I mean, this team, pretty much every team we've talked about in the past, it's been quarterback driven, but the Titans are the first team where it's pretty much running back driven, and Tannehill's kind of playing second fiddle. I'm not going to downplay what Tannehill's done with the resurgence of his career in the past 2 years.
I was going to say, you could say that them going through Derrick Henry has made Ryan Tannehill more dangerous just because it's not the first option in terms of passing the football.
Exactly, but this is definitely a team that's run through Derrick Henry, Tractor Cito. Guy just destroys people. We've seen the highlights and the runs, the breakaway runs.
378 carries last season. He was averaging 25 touches a game, over 2,000 yards on the ground. Haven't seen that. I can't even tell you who the last guy that was to do that.
No.
I know it's been a while since that happened.
17 touchdowns. Those are college numbers. Those are college number one starter numbers in the NFL for a running back. So that is awesome. He is 27 years old. So, still...
Well, that's a lot of people are wondering just what the wear and tear will do on him. He's had over
Yeah.
700 touches over the past 2 seasons. I mean, Derrick Henry is built just like a semi, like...
Yeah, he's built like a brick shithouse. That's what they say. But, like I said, this offense is going to run through him. Now, second fiddle I didn't want to say is Ryan Tannehill. And he's definitely had a resurgence with the Titans. And it's been an awesome story as a guy who was kind of, thrown to the wayside in Miami. Only going a little bit under 500 in his time in Miami. He's 18-8 as a starter with the Titans. 2020, he had a great QBR at a 78.3, threw 33 touchdowns to only 7 picks, and a few rushing touchdowns too.
Yeah, that's what they love doing, the read option, because everyone's focused on Derrick Henry, and so he got 7 rushing touchdowns with just 43 rush yards last season.
Yeah, I love it. I love it when they get on the goal line. They'll do that rollout, and he'll be the one guy, and everyone will be tackling the center, and he'll come out the side and get that touchdown. So just a great story and a great guy too.
Yeah, that's what, going back to Derrick Henry, he's the first 2,000-yard rusher since Adrian Peterson in 2012, and is like one of 8 guys in NFL history.
Dang.
So
and he's set up to do it again.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned how good Ryan Tannehill's been in his tenure so far with the Titans. Got a new pass catcher. Well, first we'll mention A.J. Brown, the guy returning.
Yeah, we're going to get to that.
This season. So A.J. Brown was a 1,000-yard receiver in each of his first 2 seasons, combined 19 touchdowns. Last year, he had 70 receptions for just over 1,000 yards, 11 touchdowns. Been a great draft pick for them out of Ole Miss, and has become that number 1 target for the Titans.
Yeah, I mean, he's playing with his almost his idol now, and another guy we'll get to, but A.J. Brown really good. Do lose Corey Davis, so a little bit sad about that. He was another one of their, kind of receiving studs.
Yeah, they lost a couple of pass catchers. Corey Davis, Adam Humphries out of the slot, and then their starting tight end, Jonnu Smith. 192 targets between those 3 last season that are probably going to get replaced by their offseason addition in the 32-year-old Julio Jones.
Yeah, sad to see Julio go from a Falcons perspective, especially the way it went down. When we talk about the Falcons in a few weeks, that's what we'll talk about. But I'll talk about him as a Titan, not as a Falcon.
Yeah.
Julio has been injured for the past years. He's definitely getting up there in age, especially for a receiver.
Only played in 9 games last season. He's been dealing with a leg injury in training camp, so that's going to be the biggest question for the Titans, and whether or not it pays off to sign Julio Jones is just how much he's going to be out there on the field, because if him and A.J. Brown are both out there, that's 2 elite pass-catching options to pair up with an elite running back and then a above-average quarterback. They're going to be another top offense in the league. It all just depends on what you can't really predict, and that's the injuries.
I mean, if A.J. Brown is the number 1 guy and Julio is now more of a number 2 role, because in Atlanta, obviously, he was a number 1, that might be better for Julio, in a sense, because maybe Julio can only have 3 or 4 catches a game, but his 3 or 4 catches could go for like 70 or 80 yards.
Well, and also just think about it. When you have Derrick Henry, you're probably going to be stacking 7 or 8 guys in the box.
Yeah.
You've got A.J. Brown and Julio Jones. I mean, you can't double team both of them, or if you do, then you're going to leave the box wide open. So Downing definitely has a lot of different play calls and formations that he can kind of mess around with to just really get some top tier production out of these guys, just because there's mismatches all over the field.
Yeah, it's an overall SEC offense, which is funny because you look at these guys, they're all SEC guys. Tannehill, Texas A&M, Julio, Bama, A.J. Brown, Ole Miss, and Derrick Henry, Bama. So it's just it's the classic SEC offense, what I'm saying? Let's talk about some other guys that they have to pass to. They add Josh Reynolds in free agency.
He was a solid wide receiver 3 for the Rams last season, had over 600 yards receiving. He'll probably end up being that wide receiver out of the slot, replacing Adam Humphries.
And then Jonas Smith going to the Patriots leaves the door open for Anthony Firkser, the Firkamaniac, as you like to call him.
I love the Firkamaniac. He had just 400 yards receiving, only 39 receptions last season, but could see an uptick in both of those. Becoming the tight end 1 now. For this team. I guess we should also mention that the Titans are kind of dealing with a little bit of a COVID issue right now. Vrabel and Tannehill yesterday was put on the COVID list. So they have, I think, 9 or 10 coaches and players in total right now in protocol.
Yeah, I mean, definitely these southern states. Luckily, the Falcons are all fully vaccinated. We talked about that last week, but hopefully more teams will follow suit.
Yeah,
I mean, these guys could also be vaccinated and have it.
Yeah, Ryan Tannehill, I heard, was vaccinated and still tested positive, but we're still at the point now where it's not really that big of a red flag, still outside of 2 weeks away from the season. Tannehill and all those other guys should be able to return within 10 days, so I think once we get into filming next week's show is kind of when the red flag is going to start coming up, and it's like, are these guys going to be able to play week 1?
Yeah. Now, their offensive line is literally middle of the pack, projected 15th best offensive line. Obviously they're a run-first kind of offense, so they're going to be leading the way on the run block.
Yeah, they were ranked 6th best run blocking offensive line last season, but 25th best in terms of pass blocking. So I guess that's a positive sign to hear about Derrick Henry, and definitely a big reason why he was able to be successful and so good last season.
Yeah.
But definitely kind of middle of the pack in terms of their offensive
line. Now,
line.
on the defensive side of the ball, they do add Bud Dupree. The defense really isn't anything to write home about. I mean, Kevin Byard is a guy who's been there a minute. But, really not a lot of guys that are really great. I mean, this team is going to be pretty much carried by their offense.
Yep. And then looking at the fantasy outlook in terms of their offense, Ryan Tannehill is currently going 12th off the board fantasy-wise, round 8 ADP. He was the QB8 last season, so definitely going to be a starting quarterback in 12-team formats, kind of one of the back-end guys drafted off the board. Derrick Henry, overall running back 4 last season, going off the board as the running back 4 for this upcoming season. He was the running back 3 last season, was the number 1 running back in standard leagues. Of course, doesn't get much pass catching, doesn't have really a pass catching ability, but he's going off the board. It's either him or Kamara is going to be the third guy off after CMC and Dalvin. So he's kind of an anomaly in terms of him actually being very successful, even though he doesn't catch the football. Fantasy-wise, usually it's those bell cow guys with the PPR that are getting all those catches. So
yeah, I mean, he'll definitely be a guy you want to draft, but like in terms of PPR, you might have to get some receiver or another running back to make up for that. AJ Brown overall was a wide receiver 7, kind of a back end of round 2. So just look for him if you're coming back around in the draft.
Yeah, he was a wide receiver 12 last season. Definitely should be able to put up numbers again this season. And then Julio's being drafted as a wide receiver 13, so going in the 3rd round. Once again, it just really depends on his health. If he plays 9 games this upcoming season, it'll probably be a waste of a 3rd-round pick. But if he's able to be healthy out there for all 16 games, I think he could have closer to wide receiver 1 fantasy numbers. Not the overall wide receiver 1, but just one of the top 10 or 12 guys.
Yeah, I'm a little bit nervous on him just because it's a new setting and we don't know. It's not like in Atlanta. If he was still in Atlanta, then I would say that may be a little bit closer to that. But it's a new situation for him, so fantasy-wise, I'd maybe be a little weary about him.
I feel like I feel like he could have a great season, but where he's being drafted in the 3rd round, there's other great options to look at that have just a little more security with their role.
Yeah, and then defense and tight end, Anthony Ferguson, just the Bills still out. There's better options available.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll move on to the last team in the AFC South, and that is the Jacksonville Jaguars. 1-15 last season. They should be able to beat out the Texans this season, but still not going to be a great football team. Urban Meyer, the new head coach for the team. Trevor Lawrence, first overall pick at quarterback, probably the new Andrew Luck, I guess you could say, in terms of just being a consensus number 1 overall pick.
Yeah, I mean, he was that since the day he came out of high school. Just a guy that's, got a lot of comparisons to Luck, and for the prototypical perfect quarterback that they're looking for. Big, good arm, just good, even decent runner too when he needs to be. So it's going to be all on Trevor, and he just got named the Week 1 starter on Wednesday.
Yeah, as if it wasn't going to be a surprise. Urban was trying to say that it was a competition.
Kind of like him getting being the first overall pick.
Yeah, exactly. Preseason, he's had okay numbers. One thing that I looked up that I found was kind of interesting is just number one overall quarterbacks that have been drafted since 2010. Their overall QB record in the rookie season
as a starter.
Yeah. All of them have been bad except for Andrew Luck, who was 11-5 in 2012 with the Indianapolis Colts. You look at Burrow from last season before he got hurt was 2-7-1. Kyler 2019 was 5-10-1. Baker 6-7. Goff was 0-7 when he started that second half of the season for the Rams. Jameis 6-10, Cam Newton 6-10, and then Sam Bradford back in 2010 was 7-9. So don't expect him to have great numbers in terms of the win-loss record. Doesn't mean he won't have great stats.
Yeah.
But in terms of overall team success, this is a team that didn't have much last season, as you can
Football,
tell by their 1-15 record.
Football is a team sport, and one guy isn't going to fix an entire team. He's certainly going to help them, and he's certainly an improvement over Minshew or whatever the heck they were, Mike Glennon that they were throwing out last year. It's certainly an improvement. He's going to have to get settled. I honestly don't think Urban Meyer is the long-term solution for this team.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw, there were reports yesterday where there's a number of people that aren't happy with some of the decision-making that he's had with the team.
I definitely think that was a step in the wrong direction. A guy who's been constantly, questioned about his methods and his ideologies in the past two jobs he's had. He's left. Ohio State is still good, but we could see some situations where he's left it in a worse situation than when he found it.
Yeah, put it this way: I don't think it's going to be a long tenure for him in Jacksonville.
No, not at all. He's definitely not going to be a guy who's going to be raised in a Lombardi in Jacksonville if they ever do, under Lawrence.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of running backs, we were a little bit on the edge, but some news came out.
There was going to be a two-headed monster, but this past week during their preseason game, Travis Etienne is going to have season-ending foot surgery.
Pretty much the first big name to be put on the season-ending IR.
Yep.
Travis Etienne, with the
Lince Frank injury.
I've never heard of that.
That's what
kind of,
Julio
leg.
dealt with. Was I think Jason Witten may have dealt with that before. Also, there's a couple of great receivers that have had that foot leg injury before. But Etienne was a promising rookie, getting drafted to remain with Trevor Lawrence, and now he's going to end up missing his whole rookie season.
Yeah, that's going to be, and as a running back too, that's a year that you need. A lot of people were very questioning this pick. Remember, we were questioning it too. I'm still going to question it, not because he got injured, but you could have had something a little bit better in the situation, especially to help your defensive side of the ball, which hasn't been doing you any favors.
But now, with that injury, James Robinson, the undrafted free agent, turned 1,000-yard rusher in his rookie season, will come into year two as the clear-cut starter. 7 touchdowns last season, had almost 50 receptions. They do add Carlos Hyde from Seattle as well. The veteran's been just about everywhere. He'll now slot in as the running back too. Had 4 touchdowns last year with the Seahawks. So he'll be able to see, especially give Robinson some breaks in the early down work. But like I said, Robinson was just a huge surprise last season. But a team that's going to be trailing a lot, you might not see them running the football a whole lot. Let Lawrence pass the ball in most of these situations, which leads us to the receiving core. DJ Chark, Marvin Jones, Laviska Shenault's going to be their wide receiver core. A couple of young guys in Chark and Shenault, and then they add the veteran and Marvin Jones, who had a couple of great seasons out with Detroit. Chark had a little bit of a regression last season. He was a 1,000-yard receiver in 2019, played just 13 games last season, only 700 yards receiving. So he's actually had hand surgery early on in August. He's expected to be ready for week 1, but if he can stay out there and stay healthy, then look for him to hopefully have a little bit more regression or progression, I guess you could say, in this upcoming season.
Yeah, and then Shenault was a guy who a lot of people were saying could play kind of everywhere, all over the offense. Kind of was a decent rookie year. Started off not too hot, but kind of his numbers kind of speak for themselves. Almost 60 catches for 600 yards with 5 TDs, which is nothing to scoff at for a rookie.
A lot of people like Shenault to have a big upgrade this upcoming season. I think that he'll be a nice kind of safety valve for Trevor, primarily kind of being manned out of the slot. Might see him get a couple of carries as well, especially with the ETN injury. But I like Chenault kind of being a Swiss Army knife and a safety valve for Lawrence and this team.
Yeah, and then they add Marvin Jones, who, last year, another productive season, almost 1,000 yards with the Lions with 9 TDs. Pretty great numbers. A guy who is a veteran pass catcher who, can get open and provide Trevor with a receiver that they really haven't had his kind of caliber in Jacksonville.
Yeah, that's what he did have an AC joint sprain in his last preseason game, but once again, is expected to be ready for week 1. But Marvin Jones, just that guy that could really explode for like a 200-yard receiving game just at any given week. So he'll definitely have his blow-up games, but is kind of taking more of a backseat to these younger guys this upcoming season. And then looking at their tight ends, just nothing notable. The biggest news was Tim Tebow getting one signed by the team, then cut after the first preseason game.
Yeah, we all saw the footage. We all saw the missed blocks and the hilarity.
Everyone knew that he wouldn't have been drafted by or signed by any other team if it wasn't coached by his old buddy Urban Meyer.
Yeah, a little bit of a media circus. A team that's trying to go in the right direction. That was just not the smartest move. Maybe they were chasing some headlines or something. Nothing bad to say about Tebow, but just maybe the booth is the better place for you right now.
Yeah, offensive line, they're going to be kind of towards the bottom, the projected 23rd offensive line. They are returning all 5 of their starters from last season,
which is always a plus.
And they drafted an offensive lineman in the 2nd round. Then looking at their defense, just like you said, Stein, they're not going to be good.
Yeah.
They were 2nd worst in points allowed, 2nd worst in yards per game allowed. They're going to give up a lot of points this season.
Do add Shaquille Griffith, brother of Shaquem, so that's interesting, and Malcolm Brown, former Patriot. But, it's kind of funny. Their defense is kind of a who's who of college stars with Miles Jack, Kayvon Chason, just those kind of guys. Shaquille Quarterman, C.J. Henderson, just all guys who were successful in college. Taven Bryan from Clemson. These guys just going to have to, play together and just get some experience. And, like I said, this team's still kind of in the mud, so there'll definitely be some growing pains.
Yep. Fantasy outlook, you got Trevor being drafted as the quarterback 10 right now in round 7. I think that might be a little bit high for him not seeing a snap yet in the NFL.
Yeah.
I think he's definitely worthy of streamer option, definitely going to be drafted. If he's not the QB1, then the QB2 just off your bench, but just without him taking a snap yet, you don't really know what to expect from him this upcoming season.
Yeah, if you're someone who focuses on their running backs and receivers first, then he could be a guy that you could take. James Robinson definitely moved up with ETN's injury.
Yeah, he's definitely into the top 20 in terms of running backs. Probably getting drafted around like the 4th round instead of the 6th round. He was the overall running back 7 last season, so I don't know if he'll put up that good of numbers, but for a guy that's looking to get probably 3 down work throughout the majority of their games, I think he's definitely a great option.
Yeah. Receiving core is pretty good. You can take DJ Chark. Average draft position is round 6.
I would say all these guys should be drafted between Chark in the 6th, Chenault in the 8th round, and then Marvin Jones just as a late round flyer. I think they're all worthy of spots on your roster. Then the tight ends and defense, just hell to the no on both of them.
Nothing notable really there. All right, y'all, let's move on to the AFC West, the last division, and our AFC preview. And what better team to start with than with the everyone's favorite team in the AFC overall, and the Kansas City Chiefs went 14-2 last year. Saw them get blown out, people were saying, in the Super Bowl against Tampa.
Yeah, coming off the Super Bowl victory a couple years ago back in 2019.
A lot of people had them beating Tampa in the Super Bowl, but kind of got punched in the mouth a little bit. So coming back as AFC favorites, Vegas, of course, no surprise though when you're led by Patrick Mahomes, who's had a record of 44-10 in his 3 seasons, including the playoffs. Just a guy who is quintessential best quarterback in the NFL right now.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I've been talking about him since we go back to our radio show a couple years
I'll
ago.
give
when
you
he was
that.
getting
That was
drafted.
one of the best. That's one of your best predictions.
Yeah.
You said he was going to be the best, where I had Deshaun over him.
Yeah, well, I mean, Deshaun was up there in terms of his play, but now with probably going to miss this season, definitely taking a step back. But yeah, Mahomes has just been a saving grace and just a perfect fit in this Andy Reid offense for the Chiefs. I mean, they were first in yards per game and pass yards per game last season. Mahomes had just under 5,000 yards passing, 38 touchdowns to 6 interceptions, and 83 QBR. He's been great since he took over.
The only knock you can put on him is maybe get his touchdown numbers up. You know, some of these guys get up in the 40s and 50s. But like I said,
it's kind of like grasping at straws.
Yeah, I mean that's nitpicking. Now we could talk all day about Patty Mahomes, but we want to get into some other parts. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, a guy who came on last season, who a lot of people really liked, but wasn't as special as people thought he could be. Only 800 rushing yards. But the one that sticks out is only 4 TDs. And not really a threat in the passing game with just a little under 300 yards.
Yeah, so that's what Edwards-Helaire is definitely the running back one, but of course relying on their passing game. Didn't see as much work as I think a lot of people thought that they would. I mean, an 800 yards rushing from a team that only lost 2 games last season, like you would think that they'd be just grounding and pounding the football, being up in ball games. But as you saw in that game with Chad Henne, with the pass to Tyreek Hill on the 4th and inches where they don't even run the football, you know that this is a very pass heavy team. In terms of backup options, they re-signed Darrell Williams. They add Jerick McKinnon to this running back group, but I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire should have a much better season running the football this year.
And it always helps to have a year under your belt in the NFL. Get the first
I'm sure Andy Reid's offense is not easy to learn.
No, exactly. And an offense that has a lot of moving parts, and a lot of these guys are, still been there and kind of expected him to really contribute day one. It's nice that he has a season to learn. His number one pass catching, option for Patty Mahomes has been Tyreek Hill, and that will continue to be Tyreek Hill.
I was going to say, you got just the wide receiver one and the tight end one with Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. Both had over 1,000 yards receiving. Both had 10 plus touchdowns. Travis had over 100 receptions last season. So just both of them are top options when we go and look into fantasy. Just a big key to Mahomes' success. The bigger question is going to be who's the wide receiver 2 for this team. End up losing Sammy Watkins.
So he was kind of the more number 2, but Mecole Hardman is definitely kind of Tyreek Hill, like diet Tyreek Hill, a lot of people say.
Yeah, that's what he's been penciled in going into training camp as a wide receiver 2. I don't think he's really done anything to lose that spot so far in training camp. Seen a little bit of praise of him so far, but he'll probably go into the season just as the first crack at being the guy opposite of Tyreek. And then you also have Demarcus Robinson and Byron Pringle. Pringle is another guy that's been talked up in training camp. But when you have Tyreek and Kelce, I guess when you're looking at this wide receiver 2, it's going to be a third, maybe 4th option when you look at the running back in terms of pass catching. So it's not too dire of an issue for this Chiefs team.
Exactly.
Looking at the offensive line, they're projected 7th best from Pro Football Focus. The big offseason news is them releasing their tackles, Eric Fisher and Mitchell Schwartz, who had been veterans on this team. But they did get some major upgrades in them trading for Orlando Brown from the Ravens right before the draft. They signed Joe Thuney, somehow have the money to sign him away from the Patriots, got that big 5-year, $80+ million payday, and then a nice draft pick in terms of getting Creed Humphrey in the 2nd round. So
Humphrey was one of the best offensive linemen last year in college, and a guy who can kind of go in there and fit really well. Now on the defensive side of the ball, defense is not like amazing, but it still has some really good names. Frank Clark, of course.
I feel like their defense probably plays better just because of how good their offense is. It's like when your offense puts up 30+ points a game, it's like, all right, as a defense, as long as we give up 25, then we're still okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same names from last year. Chris Jones, Anthony Hitchens at linebacker, Tre'Davious Ward, Tyrann Mathieu, the Honey Badger, of course, Daniel Sorensen and L'Jarius Sneed. all guys literally they're kind of returning pretty much their entire, secondary.
Yeah, and I mean, not a top 5 defense, but definitely I would say in the top half of the NFL in terms of defenses. And like I said, I think they definitely get kind of that boost from just having such an elite offense on the other side of the football. But in terms of the fantasy outlook, Mahomes is going QB1 off the board, which makes sense.
Makes complete sense.
Early second round ADP. Overall in his 3 seasons as a starter, he's been the QB4 last season, the QB8 in 2019. Both seasons he missed a couple games because of injury, and then the overall QB1 in his first year back in 2018. So going to be a great quarterback option if you want to spend one of those early picks on quarterback.
Yeah.
Clyde Edwards-Helaire is kind of we mentioned, really don't know what to expect. He was the running back 22 last season, going off the board as running back 15, kind of an early third round ADP. So definitely don't look for him to be the running back 1 on your team, but a nice running back 2, or if you go running back first 3 rounds, then him as a flex option I think would be a nice pickup.
Yeah, I kind of like that spot for him. Tyreek Hill, wide receiver 1 this year, which is awesome to hear.
It's been a back and forth so far between him and Devontae Adams as a wide receiver 1. Tyreek was a wide receiver 2 to Devontae last season, and like I said, it's kind of like a flip of a coin and which one you want. Tyreek is going to be the more boom bust, but still gets his receptions. He's not as big of a boom bust as he was a couple years ago. Compared to Devontae, but like I said. Yeah, go on ahead.
I was going to say, Kelsey, just penciled number 1 tight end.
Yeah, he's going in the first round of drafts this year on the back end. He's been the tight end 1 every single year since 2016. So definitely, if you have a tight end premium, then that's a must for your team is getting Tyreek Hill or Travis Kelce. Excuse me.
And then Mecole, maybe Robertson or some of these other guys maybe available end of the bench, stash guys. Just especially Mecole because he could be that wide receiver 2 because there's really no definitive wide receiver 2 right now.
Yeah, but once again, just drafting them as a 3rd or 4th option probably on the depth chart receiving wise.
And then that defense, stream it if you can. It could produce better, but they didn't really add anybody notable. It's just kind of the same defense as last year.
In a 12-team league, if you're the last guy to get a defense, you get them as like the 12th defense off the board.
Yeah, because this offense is going to want to stay on the field a lot, so the defense hopefully won't see too much time. They could be screwed over though by it could be a 30-7 game and they'll have to start playing prevent defense or something.
Yeah, definitely. So the Chiefs are once again going to be the heavy favorites in the AFC and definitely going to be winning this division. Yeah. Now getting to the other teams, which are kind of all fighting for that second spot. And we'll talk about. You can
make an argument for all 3 of them. Maybe one, not as much.
I think this AFC West is kind of like the NFC South in terms you got your clear cut guys like the Bucs in the South with the Chiefs, and then you have like the 3 teams that I think could all kind of hover around 500.
Make a case for all of them being, competing for that second best spot. And a team though that I think has the weakest case is the Broncos.
Yeah, they were 5-11 last season. They haven't made the playoffs since they went to the Super Bowl back in 2015, Super Bowl 50. Teddy Bridgewater was announced a Week 1 starter. That's been the big headline for this
just
team.
Announced.
Yeah, they got him from the Panthers this offseason. He was only 4-11 with the team. Had a 69% completion percentage, 3,700 yards passing. 15 touchdowns to 11 interceptions. He's going to be a major check down guy compared to Drew Lock, who's really gonna let the football fly. But going from 4-1 in 2019 to 4-9 in 2020, just a 57% completion percentage, and tied with Wentz for the lead in 15 interceptions last season.
Yeah, a guy who's really tailored to 2 seasons. Everyone was all on the Lock wagon in 2019, but saw a lot of regression in 2020.
I know you were a big Lock guy.
I am, and I still am. I know the Bridgewater news is kind of a damper on that, but we could see these guys, switch places. Bridgewater being the starter isn't set in stone. He's going to be a starter the rest of the season, of course, or even going to continue to play. So I do want to talk about the draft though.
Mm-hmm.
These guys could have taken Fields, Mac Jones, some other guys, but
Could
they
have
ended
traded up to try and get into the Trey Lance conversation.
Yeah, but they ended up taking Patrick Surtain and really kind of shook up the rest of the draft as a result.
I think a lot of people were thinking, especially when Justin Fields dropped all the way to them at the 9 pick, that they were going to end up taking him. But like you said, going with defense instead of trying to find a franchise quarterback, but then not... A lot of people would think, okay, you don't go quarterbacks, you probably trust Locke to be your starting quarterback, and then it's announced that Teddy is going to be the week 1 starter. I think it just shows a lot of uncertainty right now in that QB room, and I think we may see kind of a back and forth between Locke and Bridgewater throughout the season, which is never a good sign when you got to switch out quarterbacks like that.
No. Running back 1 is also going to be a question. Melvin Gordon, definitely not as good as he once was in San Diego, even going back to San Diego days.
Yeah, that's what he was actually almost 1,000-yard rusher last season, which I didn't realize, and had 9 touchdowns. His receiving numbers were way down though. He used to be a 3-down back there with the Chargers.
Yeah,
he missed the second preseason game with a groin issue, and then they trade up to draft Javonte Williams, which was another kind of surprise for them.
Yeah, one of those 2 really good running backs out of North Carolina.
And that's what I think that it'll probably be Melvin Gordon's job, maybe like a timeshare to start out this season. And then usually you'll see those rookie running backs, if there's already a decent starting running back in there, start to take over in the back half of the season. So you may see Javonte start to get more and more carries as the season goes along.
Yeah, running back's going to be interesting there. But receiver, you are getting Cortland Sutton back after tearing his ACL in the first game last season. So that was very sad to see him go last season, but 1,000-yard receiver in 2019. Probably gonna play tomorrow.
Yeah, that's what they said. The last big step on his checklist of being able to play week 1 was playing in a preseason game. So it's looking like he's gonna play.
Yeah.
And if all goes well, then they don't think he's gonna be on a snap count for week 1. So
definitely will help if Locke is playing to have Cortland Sutton out there. Jerry Jeudy, the Alabama product, had a pretty good season last year.
Yeah, that's
for
what
a rookie.
He should be the big beneficiary of having Teddy Bridgewater, just kind of peppering him with some short targets and let him get that yard after the catch. He was almost 900-yard receiver in his rookie year, and he's another guy kind of when we get to fantasy later on in drafts that I like as a value play.
Yeah, and then KJ Hamler and Tim Patrick are going to be your other 2 receivers. Noah Fant, coming off another a pretty decent season for a tight end. I mean, over almost 700 yards. Only 3 TDs, though, not the best. Currently dealing with some issues, and we actually got some news, I think, yesterday, more about his injuries. Should be okay for week 1, but definitely kind of a question mark.
Yeah, he's missing the last preseason game, but it should be okay for week 1. 21st ranked offensive line projected going into this season. Their left tackle Garrett Bowles is going to lead the way, their headliner on this offensive line, and then they kind of have a question mark at center right now.
Yeah, I mean, they do get Lloyd Cushenberry from LSU.
They drafted Quinn Miners, who is competing for that starting center position, but that's definitely the weak point on their offensive line.
Yeah. Now, defensively, not as good as they once were. Not the Broncos of old. I mean, Bradley Chubb is still good, and they still have Von Miller.
Yeah.
Kyle Fuller is decent. Pat Surtain looked pretty good in his 1 preseason game I watched.
I'd say that they were very
Justin
average.
Simmons is available too,
A very average defense to maybe, depending on their performance, could be a slightly above average defense.
Yeah, just not as good as they once were, and it's really sad to see a guy like Von Miller just kind of decline as he has. But, definitely just average to below average defense. Now let's talk about the fantasy. Teddy, streamer at best.
Yeah. Once again, you're not going to be drafting him if you're in a 1 QB league, but streamer getting onto the middle of the season, some quarterback injuries. You don't know how long he's going to be the starter for.
Yeah, and if Locke does come out there, then he's a streamer too. He's not a guy you should be looking at. Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams.
Javonte Williams actually being drafted ahead
Yeah, I
of
would say
Melvin
he's
Gordon
pretty.
right
He's
now.
pretty. People are high on him. With a round 5 ADP.
The only reason I would draft Javonte Williams is if you already have two kind of set in stone running backs, just kind of keep him on the bench. Like I said, I think he'll be more productive in the back half of the season. Melvin Gordon, he's going in round 6, but I would just kind of avoid him because I think he'll kind
Up there in age, where Williams is a little more upside.
I think Gordon will just kind of fade out as the season goes along. So maybe if
Hate
you
to
draft
say that, but,
if
yeah.
you draft him and he has like one good week to start the season, I would be looking to trade him away after the first couple weeks.
Yeah. Now, receiving core is a little bit interesting because you got Cortland coming back and Judy, who's expecting to take another step. Both have round 6 average draft positions.
Yeah, it's funny. All the guys for the Broncos that are getting drafted are all kind of like round 5 or 6 ADP. But I was kind of mentioning with Bridgewater under center, I really like Jerry Jeudy. I think Sutton, it kind of just with the question mark of the injury coming back and then not having Drew Lock with just the downfield throwing. I think Sutton is kind of a guy to lay off. If they're both on the board in the 6th round, then I would personally go Jerry Jeudy over Cortland Sutton.
And Fant isn't terrible of a tight end that you could take. Tight end 7 right now. Picked up around 5 or 6. He was the 8th tight end last year. So definitely a guy that if you don't have a tight end yet, you're probably could use. And then their defense is more of a streamer. I would say more of a positive streamer than some others. So.
Yeah, definitely. And then let's move on to the Oakland Raiders. They had a 500 season last year at 8-8. They have made the playoffs once since the 2002 season. It was back in 2016 when they lost in the first round. Derek Carr returns as their starting quarterback, a decent option for them. 4,000-yard passer, 27 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 71 QBR. There's really not much to talk up about Derek Carr, but there's really not too many negatives about him. He's just kind of just like their team was last season, just a very mediocre quarterback.
I mean, 4,000 yards, 27 TDs compared to 9 interceptions, 71 total QBR. That's not bad. Nothing to scoff at. He's not a bad, guy. I mean, he could have more of everything, but definitely a guy who can get the job done going into one of his getting up their seasons now. It's kind of weird to say that.
He's been in the league for a while now. At running back, you got Josh Jacobs, who's going to be the starting running back. Had a 1,000-yard season last year with 12 touchdowns. They signed Kenyon Drake, which was kind of a head-scratcher, to a 2-year, $11 million deal to be the backup running back.
So 2 Alabama guys in the backfield.
Yeah, and Drake with the Cardinals last season was almost a 1,000-yard rusher, had 10 touchdowns of his own, so it'll be interesting to see how Gruden and this coaching staff kind of feeds both of these guys. You really don't see... after a guy had a 1,000-yard rushing season, then bring in another guy that had almost 1,000 yards rushing. So
yeah,
it'll be interesting to see how they split up these carries. If Drake is going to be just the third down guy, if he's going to get his own kind of series. But I guess 2 great running backs are better than 1 great running back.
Exactly. Especially to help Derek Carr. Now looking at the receiving portion, Henry Ruggs. A lot of people are saying he was a reach a little bit. Disappointing in his rookie year. Only 13 games for 26 catches in 13 games. Not great for almost 450 yards with 2 TDs, so definitely disappointing.
It was really just a home run threat last season. I think if anything else, you really just want to kind of see him more round out his route tree in terms of just being more of a consistent pass catcher. Maybe want to see more like 5 or 6 catches a ball game and just be a more consistent guy for Derek Carr.
Yeah, do have Brian Edwards kind of stepping into that Nelson Aguilar role, who it's kind of interesting that's a role, the Nelson Aguilar role, because a lot of people are writing him off, but he had a kind of a resurgence in I was going to say Oakland, but Las Vegas.
Yeah, that's what Edwards was a rookie that didn't really do much for them last season, but there have been a lot of positive reviews from training camp about him, so he's actually been the wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 ahead of John Brown, just working out with this first team offense.
Yeah. Hunter Renfrow, I know you love Hunter Renfrow.
Man was at Clemson for 10 seasons.
Coming back is definitely that slot guy for them, 500 to 600 yards to probably going to get 3 or 4 touchdowns. That's just, slot guy numbers. Signed John Brown away from the Bills. Had a decent season, but was injured last year.
Yeah, he only played in 9 games last season, so he did have a couple of great seasons in the past with Buffalo, but like I said, it'll be interesting to see how this wide receiver depth chart works out, because right now he's the wide receiver 4, not working out with the first team, so definitely a solid option, though, if one of those guys goes down due to injury, that he'll step up into that first team offense.
Yeah.
But definitely the pass-catching group is going to run through Darren Waller, who had over 100 receptions last season, almost 1,200 yards receiving, 9 touchdowns. A lot of people were concerned, though. He missed nearly 2 weeks of camp due to an ankle issue, but he was back this week. Appears to be all good to go.
Yeah, great story. If you're ever curious about the Darren Waller story, a guy who's dealing with substance abuse and has really come on to be one of the better tight ends in the NFL, a guy who is a bona fide star now, and his numbers, show that. So hopefully he'll be ready to go for week 1 and be ready to put up the same monster numbers he has. Offensive line has been an issue for them. They are trying to rebuild it. 70 projected 22nd ranked off O-line. They did. A lot of people saying they reached for Alex Leatherwood out of Alabama.
Yeah, we went 17th overall to them. A lot of people were thinking they could have gotten him in the second round, but he'll be their new starting right tackle. And then the other big news from their offensive line is trading away Rodney Hudson to the Cardinals. So definitely going to be one of the bottom tier offensive lines in the league, which is concerning for any.
Have Richie Incognito, which is interesting, and Colton Miller isn't terrible at the left tackle position, but just definitely a lower tier offensive line. Now on the defensive side of the ball, that's been kind of their Achilles heel for a while, especially the secondary. Do try to address that by drafting Trayvon Moehrig out of TCU.
Yeah, probably the only draft pick that I really like them making in the draft this past year.
Yeah, I mean, Casey Hayward, is definitely a veteran. But other than that, I mean, Jonathan Abram is back, but just not a defense to really get excited about.
Yeah, they allowed
Yannick Ngakoue, though.
They did allow the third most points last season, so they're going to probably be in that bottom 5 in terms of points allowed again this upcoming season.
Yeah.
So look at their fantasy outlook. Derek Carr is just your prototypical QB2 and Superflex streamer option. He was a QB 17 last season, expect him to be in that 15 to 20 quarterback range again this year. Josh Jacobs is going as the running back 17 off the board. Took a little bit of a hit with them signing Kenyon Drake. He's got a mid-third round ADP. Like I said, he was the running back 8 last season, so just the threat of Kenyon Drake is kind of slipping his ADP, but still a solid running back 2 to flex option. Kenyon Drake is going in the 8th round. He was the running back 16 last season, but obviously going to see less touches and less work being the running back 2 now. Probably one of the top handcuffs if Josh Jacobs does go down, because he's got that running back 1 experience, could hop right into the running back 1 conversation in fantasy. And then in terms of their wide receivers, Henry Ruggs is going in the 11th round, and Edwards, Renfrow, John Brown kind of all going undrafted.
Yeah, I'd expect that.
Ruggs has the most upside just with him being a deep threat, could win you a week if you end up starting him. And then could be even better, like I said, if he can just get more receptions this season.
Be a little more consistent. And then, Darren Waller, 3rd tight end off the board behind Kelsey and Kittle. Definitely could be tight end 2. Drafted around the 3rd round.
Yeah, I like him a little bit more than Kittle going into this season. I think they're very close in terms of the 2nd and 3rd ranked tight end behind Kelsey. Yeah. But yeah, definitely around that end 2nd round, early 3rd round ADP should be another top option. Just vacuuming up receptions on this team, being the number 1 target.
A guy you definitely want. You know?
Definitely. And then definitely do not want the Raiders defense. Don't even look at them during streaming weeks.
No, just stay away from that defense. But like I said, tight ends, take them. Let's move on to the last team in the AFC. A team that really surprised a lot of people last year, and that was the emergence of the Chargers, the Los Angeles Chargers. Also, wanted to mention this real quick. Raiders and Chargers both playing in new stadiums that are actually open now. So they were played in last year, but we'll actually see people in them this year. So that'll be really cool to see the full stadiums. And the Chargers, new coach, Anthony Lynn out.
Yeah, they got Brandon Staley in there as the new head coach, Joe Lombardi taking over as the offensive coordinator, and they get the fun job of being able to work with Justin Herbert, who I think kind of surprised everyone last season with how good that he performed. We mentioned earlier with Tyrod Taylor being able to come in early on in the season and then just took over that QB1 role for the rest of the season, was a 4,000-yard passer, 31 touchdowns to 10 interceptions, almost a 70 QBR, so just a great rookie season for him, and I think a lot of people are expecting similar numbers this upcoming season.
Yeah, I mean, those are starter numbers those are average starter numbers, if not better, for a guy who was a rookie last year, so just going to be building on his last year. Could see a sophomore slump.
Yeah.
Could definitely see a sophomore slump. I mean, but...
I think he definitely opened some eyes to people that everyone... I mean, Joe Burrow obviously got injured last season, but a lot of people expecting him, being the number one overall pick, to be the best quarterback from that class in year one, but Justin Herbert really just setting the bar super high for that draft class and having that great season. So expect similar numbers in year number 2 for Herbert. And he also gets Austin Eckler back, hopefully, for a full healthy season. Who he was held to just 10 games last year because of injury. Had only 116 carries on the ground, just 54 receptions. You know he's going to get that great receiving work, and he's pretty much the 3-down option for this Chargers team.
Yeah, have some backups in Justin Jackson, Joshua Kelly, and Larry Roundtree, which they add. But I mean, Eckler's going to be the number one guy, and hopefully a full healthy season for him.
And then a for sure wide receiver 1 in Keenan Allen. He had exactly 100 receptions last season, just under 1,000 yards at 992. And
Couldn't
then
give him
8
that extra
touchdowns.
reception,
He only played in 13 games, so it's still great production, even though he missed 3 ball games last season. And he's just been super reliable for Phillip Rivers and Justin Herbert. Had 97 or more receptions in 4 straight seasons. So just, like I said, great production from him. Mike Williams is the wide receiver 2. Had almost 800 yards receiving, 5 touchdowns last year. He's had some injury concerns, though, in the past. Not as much over the past couple seasons, but he is in a contract year, so he's looking to have a great season before he hits free agency.
Do lose Hunter Henry, goes to the Pats, but pick up Jared Cook from the Saints, who was the Saints' pretty much primary red zone guy last year with 507 touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean, 7 touchdowns and 37 catches.
Yeah, so he's definitely the guy to look for in the red zone. So, pretty similar production, I would say, to Hunter Henry. Maybe a little more touchdowns, but kind of the same. In terms of offensive line, they do draft Rashawn Slater. A lot of people loved him out of Northwestern, I included.
Yeah, that's what they completely are remaking their offensive line, because they get Slater for the left tackle. They signed guards Matt Filer and I know I'm going to botch this name, Ode Abushi, as their 2 starting guards. They get a new center in Corey Linsley, which was a big free agent addition for them. And then the only returning guy from last season, Brian Bulaga, only played in 10 games in his first year with the team coming over from the Giants. So definitely have made some big upgrades to this offensive line, which is definitely going to help Herbert, definitely going to help Eckler, and just that whole running attack. The projected 18th ranked offensive line going into this season. I think they could even hop into the top half of those rankings by the season's end.
Yeah, and now the defensive side of the ball, you're going to have Joey Bosa, kind of that leader. Kenneth Murray, pretty good linebacker. And then your boy.
I was going to say, definitely have some big names on this defense. They draft Asante Samuel Jr., Florida State guy. Derwin James coming back from injury.
You got your boy Derwin. Chris Harris Jr. also as a cornerback. So you have 3 pretty good corners that you can use in a defense that will be overshadowed by the other LA team, but still nothing to scoff at in the Chargers defense.
100%. Looking at fantasy-wise, Justin Herbert's going off the boards as a QB6. He was the QB9 last season, so I guess people are looking for him to do even better than he did in his rookie season. I don't know if I would draft him that high, but definitely going to be a starting QB in these 12-team leagues. Austin Eckler is the running back 10 off the board, so the back end of the first round maybe drops to the early second round. He was the running back 4 back in 2019 when he was fully healthy, but look for a big season for him if he does stay healthy. Keenan Allen is the wide receiver 9 off boards. He was wide receiver 14 last season. We mentioned he missed a couple games, but definitely going to go off the boards in the 3rd round, which is some great value for him. Mike Williams, some back-end bench appeal.
He's in that contract year, so...
Yeah, so if he's able to stay healthy and out there on the field, look for some production from him as a solid receiving option. And then Jared Cook, just with how weak the tight end position is, you could definitely stream him when your tight end's on a bye and just hope that he gets a touchdown in that ball game. Yeah. And then the Chargers defense is definitely a streamer, if not a starting defense in 12-team leagues, kind of like we mentioned with I think the Chiefs defense, how if they're the 12th defense off the board, then definitely fine with them being a starting defense in your leagues. But that's going to finish out the rest of the AFC in this show. So we looked at the Chiefs, who's going to be probably the front runner this upcoming season. In our next podcast, we'll take a look at start looking at the NFC. Haven't decided which 2 teams we'll do yet because we're going to try and get it in before the first game of the season.
Friday, Thursday. I think it's Thursday. Dallas.
Yeah, it's Thursday. Not this upcoming
Dallas
Thursday, the following Thursday. But we might look at the NFC South next week just to get them in before the game. Bucks end up playing. But that will do it for this episode of the Couch Quarterbacks podcast. We appreciate you guys listening each and every week. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at the Couch Quarterbacks. For Ben Steinberg, I'm Andrew Rochford. Once again, thank you guys for listening. We'll see you on the flip side.
Deuces. See you guys. Thank you.